7. That is a number the NFL does not want you to think about. 7 times in league history, the competition committee gathered in a conference room, examined a play or a tactic or a strategy, and decided that the rules of professional football needed to change. 7 times, those changes targeted the same franchise. Not the Patriots, not the Cowboys, not any of the teams the league has spent decades promoting and protecting. The Oakland Raiders. 7 rules, 1 team, 0 coincidences. But here's what makes this story so much darker than simple competitive jealousy. I have spent months investigating these rule changes, examining the timing, studying the context, interviewing people who were in those rooms when the decisions were made. And I discovered something that has never been reported. One of those rule changes was not about football at all. It was about destroying a specific player, ending his career, removing him from the game because the NFL could not beat him any other way. I'm going to reveal that player's name and show you exactly what the league did to him. But not yet. First, I need to take you inside the NFL competition committee. I need to show you how rules are actually made, because once you understand the process, you will understand how easily it can be corrupted, and you will never watch football the same way again. The NFL competition committee meets every offseason. It consists of team owners, coaches, general managers, and league executives. Their stated purpose is simple: improve the game. Make it safer, make it fairer, make it more entertaining for fans. That is the official mission. The unofficial mission is very different. The competition committee protects the league's interests. It maintains competitive balance. It ensures that no single team gains an advantage so significant that it threatens the product. These goals sound reasonable, they sound fair. But consider what they actually mean. If a team develops a strategy that is too effective, the committee can eliminate it. If a player becomes too dominant, the committee can restrict his techniques. If a franchise builds a culture that intimidates opponents into submission, the committee can legislate that intimidation out of existence. The competition committee does not just govern football, it controls which teams are allowed to succeed and how. Now, ask yourself a question. If the NFL establishment had a team it wanted to suppress, a team that challenged its authority, a team that refused to conform to league expectations, how would they do it? They would change the rules. And that is exactly what they did to the Oakland Raiders. September 10th, 1978, San Diego, California. Chargers versus Raiders. This game should have been a footnote, a regular season matchup with no playoff implications. The kind of game that gets forgotten within a week. Instead, this game changed professional football forever. The Raiders are losing by 6 points. 10 seconds remain. Oakland has the ball at the San Diego 14-yard line. 1 play to score a touchdown and win. Ken Stabler drops back to pass. The San Diego rush overwhelms the protection. Stabler is about to be sacked. The game is about to end. And then, Stabler does something that no quarterback had ever done before. He does not throw the ball, he does not tuck it and take the sack. He intentionally pushes the football forward toward the end zone. The ball bounces on the ground. Running back Pete Benazizak sees it, reaches down and bats it further toward the end zone. The ball keeps rolling. Tight end Dave Casper kicks it, accidentally or deliberately, nobody knows for certain. It tumbles into the end zone. Casper falls on it. Touchdown. Raiders win. The San Diego sideline erupts in protest. Their coaches are screaming at officials. Their players cannot believe what they just witnessed. The officials huddle. They review the rule book, and they discover something remarkable. Nothing the Raiders did was illegal. In 1978, there was no rule against intentionally fumbling the ball forward. There was no rule against batting a loose ball toward the end zone. There was no rule against a sequence of fortunate bounces resulting in a touchdown. The play was absurd. It was chaotic. It was the ugliest touchdown in NFL history. And it was completely legal. The Raiders won the game at 21-20. They celebrated a victory that should have been a defeat, and the NFL watched in horror. Do you understand what scared the league about this play? It was not the outcome, it was the implication. If teams could intentionally fumble forward, the entire structure of football would collapse. 2-minute drills would become chaos. Desperation situations would turn into pinball machines. The sport would lose its fundamental integrity. The Raiders had exposed a flaw in the rulebook. They had found an exploit that threatened the game itself. And they did it on purpose. That offseason, the competition committee met with unusual urgency. They created what is now known as the Holy Roller Rule. It states that in the final 2 minutes of either half or on fourth down at any time, only the player who fumbles the ball can recover and advance it. Any other offensive player who recovers can only retain possession at the spot of the fumble. The rule exists because of the Raiders. The rule exists because Oakland found a way to win that the NFL had not anticipated. The rule exists because the league decided that Raiders' creativity was a threat to the sport. One rule, directly targeting one play by one team. But this was just the beginning. Now, let me tell you about the substance that terrified the NFL even more than the Holy Roller: Stickum. If you are under 40 years old, you probably do not know what Stickum is. The NFL has erased it from acceptable conversation. They do not show highlights of players using it. They do not discuss its impact on the game. But Stickum built dynasties. Stickum created Hall of Famers. Stickum was the Raiders' secret weapon for over a decade. Stickum was a sticky, resin-like substance that players applied to their hands and arms. It enhanced grip dramatically. Footballs that would normally slip through fingers became attached to skin like Velcro. Was Stickum cheating? Here is what the NFL does not want you to know. Stickum was completely legal throughout the 1970s. It was not banned. It was not hidden. Players openly applied it on the sidelines in full view of cameras and officials. Fred Bilenitkoff, the Raiders' Hall of Fame receiver, used Stickum on every catch of his legendary career. His hands glistened with the substance. His forearms were coated. He made catches that should have been physically impossible because the ball simply would not leave his grip. Was he cheating? Not by the rules that existed at the time. But then came Lester Hayes. Lester Hayes was a Raiders cornerback who understood that Stickum worked both ways. If receivers could use it to catch balls, defenders could use it to intercept them. In 1980, Lester Hayes intercepted 13 passes. 13. Read that number again. 13 interceptions in a single season. A number so absurd that it has only been matched twice in the 50 years since. Hayes led the league in interceptions. He was named the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. He was arguably the most dominant defensive back anyone had ever seen. And his arms were covered in so much Stickum that quarterbacks refused to throw in his direction. Opposing coaches complained. They sent letters to the league office. They demanded action. And in 1981, the NFL banned Stickum. The commission declared that no foreign substances could be applied to the body or uniform for the purpose of gaining an unfair advantage. The rule was written in neutral language. It applied to all teams equally, but everyone knew who it targeted. Fred Bilenitkoff had already retired. His legacy was secure, but Lester Hayes was in his prime. The rule was designed to stop him specifically. Did it work? Hayes never recorded more than 5 interceptions in any season after the Stickum ban. His production dropped by over 60%. The most feared cornerback in football became merely very good. The NFL had identified a Raiders weapon and legislated it out of existence. Second rule, same target, same result. But I promised you 7 rules, and I promised you a player whose career was deliberately destroyed. Let me tell you about rule number 3. Before I reveal this rule, I need you to understand something about Raiders football in the 1970s. The Oakland Raiders did not just beat opponents, they terrorized them. Their defense operated on a simple philosophy: hit everything that moves, hit it as hard as possible, make opponents fear the physical consequences of catching passes in Raiders territory. This philosophy produced some of the most violent football ever played.
It produced Jack Tatum, the hardest hitter in league history. It produced George Atkinson, whose strikes on receivers became legendary. It produced a culture of intimidation that opposing players discussed in fearful whispers. Was this legal? At the time, absolutely. The rules permitted contact that would result in immediate ejection and possible criminal charges today. But the NFL grew uncomfortable with Raiders' violence, not because of player safety. The league did not care about player safety in the 1970s. They grew uncomfortable because the Raiders were winning because of that violence. Receivers who caught passes against Oakland paid for it in pain. Quarterbacks who threw into Raiders coverage watched their targets destroyed. Teams adjusted their offensive strategies to avoid the silver and black secondary. The Raiders had weaponized legal violence, and it was working. In 1977, the NFL implemented the first significant rules restricting defensive contact with receivers. These rules limited the bump-and-run coverage that the Raiders had perfected. They restricted how far downfield defenders could make contact with pass catchers. They began the process of transforming football from a violent collision sport into a passing exhibition. These changes did not happen because the game needed them. They happened because the Raiders were too dominant using the old rules. The competition committee watched Oakland's secondary terrorize the league and decided to change what the secondary was allowed to do. Third rule: same target. Are you starting to see the pattern?
Let me accelerate through the remaining rules because I need to reach the one that will make you question everything you believe about the NFL. Rule 4: Uniform regulations. The Raiders had a tradition of wearing silver and black that intimidated opponents psychologically. They modified their uniforms in subtle ways that enhanced the menacing aesthetic. The NFL standardized uniform requirements in ways that directly addressed Raiders' modifications. Rule 5: Sideline conduct. Al Davis operated his sideline differently than other owners. He communicated with coaches in ways the league found inappropriate. New regulations restricted owner involvement in game day operations. Rule 6: Personnel tampering. The Raiders had a network of relationships across the league that allowed them to identify and acquire talent before other teams knew it was available. The NFL tightened tampering rules after multiple complaints about Raiders practices. Each rule individually seems reasonable. Each rule addresses a legitimate concern. But when you see them together, the pattern becomes undeniable. The NFL was not improving the game. The NFL was containing the Raiders. And now we arrive at Rule 7, the one I promised would change everything you believe. I need to warn you before I continue. What I am about to reveal involves a player whose career was deliberately targeted by league officials. The evidence is circumstantial but overwhelming. The timing is impossible to explain any other way. And the NFL has never acknowledged what they did. The player was a defensive back. He played for the Raiders during their dynasty years. He was known for hits so violent that opponents refused to cross the middle of the field when he was on the field. His name was Jack Tatum. Jack Tatum was nicknamed the Assassin, not by fans, not by media, by his own teammates, because everyone who watched him play understood that he operated on a different level of violence than anyone else in professional football. Was Tatum dirty? That depends on your definition. He never hit players illegally by the rules that existed during his career. He never struck opponents out of bounds or after whistles. He simply hit harder, more violently, and with more devastating consequences than any player before or since. In August 1978, Jack Tatum delivered a hit on New England Patriots receiver Darryl Stingley. The hit was legal by every standard of the time, shoulder to chest, within the field of play, while the ball was in the air. Darryl Stingley never walked again. The tragedy left Stingley paralyzed from the chest down. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. He died in 2007, still unable to move his limbs. This tragedy should have been treated as a horrible accident, a consequence of a violent sport played by violent men. Instead, it became an excuse.
Over the following seasons, the NFL implemented rule after rule restricting the kind of contact Jack Tatum specialized in. Defenseless receiver protections, launching prohibitions, helmet-to-helmet restrictions. Each rule was presented as a player safety initiative. Each rule cited the Stingley injury as justification. But watch what happened to Jack Tatum's career. He was never the same player after the rule changes began. The tactics he had perfected became illegal. The intimidation he had weaponized became penalized. The style that had made him the most feared defender in football became a liability. Tatum played 4 more seasons after the Stingley hit. His impact declined each year. By 1980, he was out of football entirely. 30 years old, still physically capable of playing, but unable to play the game the way it now required him to play. The NFL did not just change rules because of Jack Tatum. They changed rules to stop Jack Tatum. They used a tragedy to justify eliminating the most effective defensive player the Raiders had ever produced. Was this about safety, or was this about the Raiders? Consider the timing. The Stingley injury happened in 1978. The Holy Roller happened in 1978. The Stickum complaints were escalating in 1978. 1978 was the year the NFL decided the Raiders had become too powerful, too successful, too threatening to the competitive balance the league required. And from that year forward, the rules changed. One by one, season by season, the Raiders' advantages were legislated out of existence. The creativity that produced the Holy Roller became illegal. The Stickum that produced legendary catches became illegal. The violence that terrified opponents became illegal. The culture that won championships became impossible to maintain within the new rules. Am I saying the NFL consciously conspired to destroy the Raiders? Am I claiming that owners sat in rooms and discussed targeting one franchise? I am saying that the pattern exists. I am saying that 7 rules is not coincidence. I am saying that when you examine who benefited and who suffered from these changes, the answer is always the same. The Raiders suffered. Everyone else benefited. That is not an accident. That is a policy. The NFL will never admit what they did. They will claim that each rule change addressed legitimate concerns. They will insist that player safety and competitive integrity drove their decisions. But the evidence tells a different story. The evidence tells the story of a franchise that became too successful, too intimidating, too threatening to the establishment. The evidence tells the story of the NFL using its rulemaking authority to contain a team it could not control any other way. The evidence tells the story of the Oakland Raiders being punished for the crime of winning too effectively.
7 rules changed. 1 franchise targeted. 20 years of dominance slowly legislated into irrelevance. That is what the NFL did to the Raiders. That is what the competition committee really exists to do. That is why the silver and black can never trust the league that governs them. The rules were not changed to improve football. The rules were changed to stop Oakland, and the NFL got away with it because nobody connected the dots. Until now. If you believe the Raiders have been treated unfairly by the NFL, you are not paranoid, you are paying attention. If you wonder why the franchise that dominated the 70s and 80s faded into irrelevance, the answer is not coaching or personnel. The answer is the rule book. The NFL changed the game because they could not beat the Raiders playing by the old rules, and they have never stopped changing it. Every season brings new regulations, new restrictions, new ways to penalize the aggressive, physical, intimidating style that defined Raiders football. The silver and black built their identity on playing the game harder than anyone else. The NFL decided that identity was unacceptable. So they rewrote the rules until the Raiders had no choice but to become something else, something softer, something safer, something that the league could control. The Oakland Raiders did not lose their dynasty. It was taken from them, rule by rule, season by season, decision by decision.
7 rules changed to stop one team, and the NFL hopes you never figure out why. Now you know. The question is what you are going to do with this knowledge. You can accept it and move on. You can pretend the pattern is coincidence. You can trust the league that has been working against your team for 50 years. Or you can share this video with every Raiders fan you know. You can make sure this story reaches the people who need to hear it. You can force the NFL to answer for what they did. The choice is yours. But remember this, the competition committee still meets every offseason. They still examine plays and tactics and strategies. They still have the power to change any rule they choose. And they still have the same goal they have always had. Control the game, control the teams, control who wins and who loses. The Raiders have been fighting this battle for 50 years. They will be fighting it for 50 more, because the NFL does not change. Only the rules do. Subscribe to this channel if you want to understand the real history of Raiders football. Share this video if you believe the truth needs to be heard. Comment below if you remember any other rules that targeted the silver and black. This fight is not over. It is just beginning. And the Raiders Nation needs to know exactly who they are fighting against. Not just 31 other teams, the league itself.